know what these are? These are the kinds of photos you see when you sign up to volunteer. You know this is true. Look how happy these kids are. Look how well behaved. I mean, first graders just sitting in a circle following instructions. Or maybe there's this one. Look at the toddlers and they're all quiet and nobody's crying. Or what about this one back here? Teenagers just loving each other and no one is fighting and everything is perfect. Listen, as a volunteer, I can tell you, this is not what my small group looked like. I mean, who wouldn't want to show up for kids like this? That's why we put them on the brochure. Of course, by now your experience has probably been similar to mine, that most of your conversations, they don't look like this. In reality, our conversations each week, well, they're just a little more messy. I mean, maybe you've shown up to volunteer and you have found yourself surrounded by crying toddlers in a pile of trampled goldfish. Nothing like this. Or maybe you showed up to volunteer with little kids and you found yourself in this argument about which Pokemon was better or like what the right rules are for Simon Says. Or maybe, like me, you have tried to have some significant spiritual conversations with middle schoolers and ended up in the middle of an arm wrestling or a cartwheel competition. Or maybe you're a high school leader who knows what it's like to show up, ready for a great conversation, and nobody in your group showed up at all. The point is, when you show up to lead conversations with kids and teenagers, it is rarely going to be like these perfect pictures. And when these conversations go off the rails, you and I always find ourselves asking the same question. Am I doing this right? I mean, as a volunteer, it can be really difficult to answer that question. I know I've wondered, am I leading this conversation right? Am I playing this game right? Am I doing anything meaningful with these kids? Really? I mean, how do you know if what you're doing is the right thing? And how do you know it's working? Well, first, if you've found yourself asking those questions, I want you to know you're not alone. As leaders, asking, am I doing this right? Is something we all do from time to time, and there are probably a million ways to answer that question. But the easiest way to measure whether we're doing it right, I'll be honest, it's just going down a little checklist. It's going down a list of everything that we want to accomplish that day and putting a tidy check mark next to all the things we've managed to get done. Did you read the whole lesson? Check. Did you ask every single question? Check. Did you finish the activities that you were assigned? Check, check, and check. And the truth is, doing all those things is great. But after years of leading kids and teenagers, here's what I've learned. Checking all the boxes is not always the best way to measure whether we're getting it right. As leaders, there's so much more to what we do than just getting through the lesson each week. It's so much bigger than that. Here's why. When we show up each week, you and I aren't leading a lesson or a discussion or an activity. We're leading people. And people are much more than a to-do list. Now, some of you are leading some little people with some big emotions who want to have fun, and they also want to feel safe. And they're also little people whose brains are just developing an understanding of God, and they will carry that understanding with them for the rest of their lives. Others of you, well, you're leading teenage people with complex life situations and big questions about God and themselves and everybody else. But either way, the conversations you have each week are really, really important. Your conversations, your time together will shape how the next generation sees God. And while every week matters, the key to making the weeks matter more, it might surprise you. Here's what I'm talking about. Come with me. If we want our conversations with kids and teenagers to make a lifelong difference, then there are some things we need to do more of and some things we need to do less of. For example, if we really want our conversations to matter, we will speak less. Okay, I know, that probably sounds a little counterintuitive, right? especially if we think the goal is to get through all the questions and tell all the Bible stories and stay on task at all costs. I mean, after all, the Bible's a really big book and we don't have a lot of time. If we only have 30 minutes or so to make a difference, it makes sense that we want to cram as much information and as many words into that time as possible. I'm sure we all feel a sense of urgency to not waste what we've been given, and that isn't wrong. But that sense of urgency can cause us to say as much as we can, as fast as we can, and if we're not careful, we could end up talking at kids and teenagers instead of talking with them. See, when we talk at somebody, it's not really a conversation. A conversation is two people. We were equally invested and have an equal opportunity to share what they think. But if we're only talking at our group, that conversation quickly turns into something that feels more like a lecture. It's not fun, but more importantly, it's not even how kids learn. See, research is super clear that kids of all ages learn better when they interact with the information, not just when they hear it. And that means they learn better and they remember better when they have the chance to ask questions and debate and illustrate and role play and argue with what they just heard. So if we want our conversations with kids and teenagers to stick, if we want them to walk out the door and remember what they heard, well, then one of the best things we can do is turn down the number of words, go lower on the volume of our own voices, and speak a little bit less. And here's something else. The kids and the teenagers in our small groups, see, they definitely have things they want to say, and that means that we need to listen more. See, they have stories they want to share. They have opinions and thoughts that they want us to know about. And as leaders, we have to be willing to not just give them a chance to speak, but we have to actively listen to what they have to say, even if that means that we turn the volume down on our own voice to turn the volume up on theirs. We get to learn exactly what our groups are thinking when we listen. We don't have to just guess, like, did they understand that, or did they agree or disagree? They'll tell us. But what does it look like to take a step back and really listen to our groups? Well, obviously that means we speak less, right? And sometimes that means you and I are just sitting in silence when nobody's talking. Instead of jumping right in right away, we let that silence ride out for a bit. And listen, I know it feels awkward, but giving this space can really give those quiet kids a moment to wrap their head around what they've learned and how they feel about it. It also means making sure we don't always just jump in with our own examples or our own ideas or our own insights, but we let the kids and teenagers in our group always share first. And then we give an encouraging 1 or 2 sentence prompt like, tell me more, to keep the conversation flowing. Now, I don't know about you, but for me, the idea of sitting in silence while a kid processes makes me so uncomfortable. I hate it. It feels so awkward. So let me give you a pro tip. Always bring a water bottle. Here's why. See how long that took? See, it's nearly impossible to rush the conversation or jump to share my own answers when I have a mouthful of water. And taking a sip after every question forces me to take a moment and really listen to what the kids in my group are saying. So take a sip, speak less, listen more, and here's something else we can do. Control less. Okay, does that sound terrifying to you? I get it, it does for me. I mean, a few years ago, I was leading a small group conversation and I thought it was going super well. And then this kid in my group goes, do you think unicorns are real? I was like, buddy, we're talking about the Apostle Paul. And by the way, those were not little kids, those were teenagers. It was totally random. And of course, the group goes immediately off topic, debating all kinds of things. I'm sure after leading, you know exactly what that feels like. I'm sure you've had a conversation derailed by a comment about somebody's pet, or Pokemon, or TikTok, or cheerleading, or hot Cheetos, or whatever it is for your group. And I don't know about you, but when those disruptions happen, my immediate reaction is always to shut it down. I want to redirect their behavior, stop the laughter, and use my authority to get the group back on track. In other words, I want to control my group. And I bet I'm not alone. When our group is a little off topic or a little wild, the whole idea of control less seems terrible, but just go with me for a second. Imagine if you followed that rabbit trail. What if, instead of trying to control the conversation, you just roll with it for a second? I mean, sure, the conversation you have will not be exactly what's written on your small group document. It probably won't even be as same as the conversation happening next to you. But sometimes a natural conversation is just more meaningful than a well-controlled one. And think about it this way. A great tour guide allows the participants to wander, but also leads them toward the best spots. And as a volunteer, your role is the same. Allow the conversation to wander, but look for places to introduce them to God's character and biblical principles along the way. Follow the rabbit trails, but also be the voice that can lead your group back to the main idea. See, here's what I'm getting at. When you control less, you can lead more. When you turn the volume down on control, you can turn the volume up on your own leadership. And hey, I know this sounds scary, and sometimes controlling the conversation less will lead kids or teenagers to be rowdy, it will lead them to be giggly, it will lead them to be wild. But listen, other times, when you let the conversation wander just a little bit, you will find kids and teenagers opening up about their everyday lives. They'll share with you about the drama in their friend group, or what's going on at home, or how it felt when they didn't make the team. They'll talk to you about the situations that worry them or that make them wonder where God is in all of this. And when that happens, when a kid or a teenager trusts you with that kind of information, you and I have the opportunity to speak the truth of God's love into very real moments. You and I get to show them what it means to live an everyday kind of faith. See, those moments are powerful, and they only happen when we loosen our grip on controlling the conversation and let our students open up, even if that means we lead them. So listen, I know it's scary, but it's okay to control the conversation less and lead wherever the conversation is going. Okay, there's one more thing we could do a little less or a little more of. Let's talk about scripts. Now, I know when you volunteer each week, you are not making a movie, but just go with me on this. It's pretty hard to find somebody who doesn't know something about the Star Wars movies, right? Especially there's this scene, maybe you know it, where Han Solo was about to be frozen forever, and before that could happen, Princess Leia says, "I love you," and Han Solo has this most iconic response, "I know." What a great line. And even if you have never seen a Star Wars movie, it may be a line that you recognize. And it might surprise you to know that that line, well, it was never in the original script. It was improvised. But out of so many great lines in that whole Star Wars series, that's the one that a lot of people can recite by heart. And I bring it up because beautiful things can happen when we script less. And think of your volunteering time like a movie for a second. I mean, chances are you have a script in mind. You have a plan for how that time is going to go and how the beginning, middle, and end is going to look. And a script is a great thing until it isn't. I mean, sometimes that script doesn't work. Like when a question or an activity is just not connecting with your group, or when the kids in your group just can't seem to stop fidgeting, or maybe like me, you've had a group that's really, really talkative, or maybe you've had a group that doesn't talk at all. And when those things happen, you may need to improvise a little and switch things up. Of course, there are other times you may need to throw your plan away entirely. Like when you have double the kids show up and you don't have enough supplies, or when there's only one person in your group, or, oh, I've had this one happen, when your entire group is fighting, sometimes you have to go off script. Or when your community experiences a tragedy, there's no script for that. And as a leader, I want you to know that you're allowed to script less and improvise more. You're allowed to improvise more, maybe even more than you think. See, you have permission to improvise and change the questions. You can make up new rules to the game. You can stop everything and pray for a kid. You can change the activity, or you can decide this week, we're just making a fun memory together. Here's why. Nobody knows that group of kids or teenagers quite like you. And as their leader, you know what they need from this time together this week. So this week, when you hold your materials in hand for your time together, don't think of them as a script you have to follow. They're just a starting place for you to begin to improvise and lead those kids in a way that only you can. Listen, as leaders, we will always feel the urgency to get through the lesson, to say all the things, and to finish everything on our list. That sense of responsibility is what makes us good leaders. But what has been entrusted to us as leaders of toddlers and big kids, of preteens and seniors, well, it's bigger than a checklist. We've been entrusted with the faith and the future of the next generation, and sometimes that means we need to press pause on our plans, press pause on our assumptions, press pause on our control, and learn to listen so we can have better conversations.